Hello and good evening. Welcome to Advit Webinars. This is series 2 where we are talking with the core team. Series 1, which was held in the month of August and September last year, was intended towards the candidates who had joined us as interns for 3 months starting November last year. In today's webinar, I welcome Mr. Samir, who is in Melbourne, Australia, my wife Madhu, and Sakar, who is in Vile Parle, Mumbai, Samarth, who is in Navi Mumbai, and Joey, who is a young student in Melbourne, Australia. I'm also expecting a few more friends to join in. As they join in, I'll introduce them quickly. The 3 points that we are going to cover today are why are we holding this meeting, this webinar. The second point is the keystone where we are going to focus. Why is the family system so critical today? And then we will take questions. Without further delay, let me come to the first point, why we are holding this meeting. Now, most of you who are with me in this webinar, you have witnessed what we have been doing in terms of helping people with skills. I had started, as Samir ji knows, by producing a book on helping people to learn English. And I had published that book, which was about how to learn English, which was around 12 years ago. Having started with English, I had kept progressing, and we continued to help people with the skills with career management, employability, soft skills, skills for managing business, and even skills with and habits with money, and maybe even parenting skills and family management skills. So there is a broad spectrum of skills that we have been helping people with, and that is where we have noticed that people change their orbits when they have a new set of skills, and they become more successful with the new set of skills. So as a system, my success is less important, and the success of Advit as a system is more useful to others, and that is what drives us. How can we help more people? And that is what is one of the reasons we are so driven. In other words, success of Arvind Agarwal is secondary to the success of Advit as a system. And although, like I have been making a mention to Samirji in one of the earlier interactions around 6 years ago, that I wanted to focus on giving the benefit of all this development and all these insights to the market in India first. But as we know, there are two things. One, the problem is global, and two, even if we want more Indians to accept our methodologies and approaches and framework, in order to increase its acceptability, we may have to start from international platform. And going back to history, I draw from the anecdote of Subhash Chandra Bose, when he experienced enormous resistance from the leaders within India. He had to move out of India to make Azad Hind Fauj. So hopefully we are able to develop a core team around these discussions, and through these discussions, team of people who are who share the same vision and concern and ideologies, and we are able to give a framework by becoming a strong team, a force as we can call it. And nonetheless, I cannot forget to acknowledge Samir ji's suggestion in one of the last week's conversation, when he eagerly suggested that why don't we start a discussion group who may be in different parts of the world, but through these discussions we come closer to each other, come on same page, and maybe there are people who would like to make it happen in a much bigger scale, and that is where we zeroed in on having these discussions, and we are together here. This takes us to the second point of today's discussion. Why has the family system become the critical factor today? And although this is a little complex point to discuss, but I have made it simpler to understand, at least through a parallel which I draw from the concept of infrastructure. It is said that a car is useless if there were no infrastructure of roads or gas stations. Now, we may not realize that infrastructure exists, or it was somebody who created the infrastructure, so we are able to enjoy the facilities today. We almost seamlessly plug into one infrastructure from the previous and to the next and to the next. For example, we get into the car that we bought from market. The market itself is an infrastructure. We drive the car to small lanes inside our colony or inside our suburb locality. Those thin roads lead us to the express highways, and those express highways are again huge infrastructure. We park the car and we get into the metro or airplane. Now the metro or the airlines or the airport itself is infrastructure. So we shuttle between one infrastructure to the next without even realizing that it prevails or it exists. But generally it is true that infrastructure comes first if we need to be comfortable and to be able to use it. And if the highways and airports and hospitals and the Wi-Fi network, if the railway stations, if the schools, if they are all hard infrastructure, then there is something called soft infrastructure that I would like to point out, and something that prevailed before 90s, and I would like to compare it with what it is today. I am talking about the family system. Family, which is if I use the biology, what a cell is to body or tissue, same is family to the society. So the kind of family system we had before 90s and the kind of family system that we have today, we will quickly compare these two in next couple of minutes, and then we'll be able to see what is missing. So the social or the soft infrastructure that we had before 90s comprised of the experience and the wisdom and the insights and the values which we gather in the process of growing up. And these ideologies or these value systems were available to us through informal conversations or counseling or the narrative or the purpose a family is trying to pursue, and it was transferred to us through a very cordial relationship that we had in the joint family system, or the families which were closely knit with each other, the families of relatives and the neighborhoods. Now, those cordial relationship provided us hand-holding and guidance and kind of emotional security, that is one of the basic human needs, right? As a child, those who were born before 70s or before 80s, they know that a family comprised of maybe the grandparents and the parents, and then the uncles and aunties and siblings, cousins, of various age groups. I mean, you could find a family where there is a child of 2 and his cousin is 26. So you had children of all the ages from 2 to 26, and of course both the genders, the male and the female. So you had brothers and sisters, cousins of all the age groups, and you had apart from your own parents, you had uncles and aunties in the families. So those were the families where there was a lot available by default. And it was getting transferred to the next generation without an obvious or visible process, but it was very much around, like air, we can say, in the environment. Now, having said that, we have moved slowly to a society where most families are either nuclear families, and they have moved from their root or hometown to the next cities, and maybe even internationally. Now it's perfectly fine to be moving, because I believe that is to migrate is one of the human nature. To leave the place of original living is in our DNA. But what has happened is, in last couple of years, we have not only become a nuclear family, but we have in the process, and especially in last 10 years with the technological overdosing and excessive involvement in the career or the corporate life, the two elements which is marked with the red rectangles or box here, the conversations, the counseling, the narrative, the cordial relationship or connection, and hand-holding and guidance, these are the things which have started disappearing in families in a slow but alarming pace. I'll not say that experience is not available, or wisdom is not available, or insights or values are not available. In fact, we have more books today, we have more videos today, we have more resources today than ever before. So the missing elements in the society today is something which we can attribute to the phenomena, elements which kept us together. And I say this with caution and full awareness, because in the process of my work with thousands of people in last decade or so, I have seen that whenever we try to impart them with the skills, ultimately the roots of skill development or capacity development are inside the family, right? Like we spoke about emotional security that family system can provide. But it is not just the emotional security or the social aspect that a family has to play some role in. It is also having active involvement or active role in imparting or making sure that there is an environment where the skills develop, right? I mean, because of dysfunctional families today, because of the family atmosphere not being correct today, people are living with, especially the youngsters are living with unanswered questions in their mind. And that is leading to low skills and low skill levels all around it. I mean, you can notice that people have unanswered question about the English or the language skills, the communication, the relationship, parenting, money, career, business, technology. I mean, let me give an example. There may be a family who has put their child to English medium schooling for first time. Or there may be a family who generally speak good English. But how to use English as a tool for, for career or business, people don't know. People wonder, unanswered question, as to why did the child not have sufficient English skills in spite of having gone through convent education. Take another example about money. People don't want to think about money altogether. They are either confused about money, or because they don't have any clear-cut approach or ideology about the money, they keep spending the entire life with one formula that complete your education, find a job, and set up a family. The questions like, how can I make myself financially comfortable? Is it good to earn money, or is it a sign of greediness? So these are the questions people avoid altogether. And I mean, I'll give you another example to do with the people's approach towards, say, for example, youngsters who are concerned about career management. When I impart workshops in employability skills or career management skills, I come across cases where there is a participant who is very sincere and there is a participant who doesn't care, right? Now, after diagnosing such cases a number of times, I have found that people who are sincere actually belong to the families where they're spending in the evening doing some part-time job, or spending their weekends doing some kind of social work, or maybe helping their parents or relatives in their businesses. So the people who come from a family where they're taught about the dignity of work don't mind working, whereas the people who need those kind of training or skill development have a total carelessness about this kind of interventions. Reason, again, the family, because it is the family who imparts them the value as to what to respect and what not to respect. So all the formal programs, all the formal policies, all the government projects of skill development will have a limitation as to what is happening inside the family that is going to control the conduct and behavior and the skill development of the youngsters. It is not the trainer, it is not the resource, it is not the policy, it is not the training program which is going to ensure the effectiveness. If they want, they can develop the skills because there are enough resources already available on the internet. So the whole onus in a way depends or lies upon the soft infrastructure that we are calling family. So something which was as a culture, as a environment available to the youngsters by default, unfortunately is not available to the millennials or to the youngsters who are born in last 15-20 years. And that is a very critical and alarming situation, and perhaps this is happening globally all over. So a coherent joint family system was the soft infrastructure to which each new family could simply plug in and move on, and they got the narrative and the counseling and the examples from the family itself. But today, if you look at your own contact list, you will find that there are three types of families. The families which are dysfunctional, where you can actually see very clearly the symptoms of something going wrong, the frequent disagreements among the family members, kind of feud you can call it, on small and big matters, which could be maybe, which channel to watch, to maybe the property related issues. So dysfunctional families where you have if I can use the word, domestic crime happening, but depending on the local culture, those domestic crimes may or may not get reported. Those domestic crime may or may not get noticed altogether, or they may not get talked altogether about. And even the people who are experiencing or going through somehow, that pain, may or may not seek counseling, which is, of course, which is alarming. The second category of families, those who are, which we can call average families, average in terms of, they're leading a mediocre life. They are typically the ones who tend to fall towards becoming dysfunctional if they don't, don't pursue a framework or a path of developing their own self. Because sooner or later, as the family grows, there will be pressures of the children growing up, pressures of the family, pressures of the higher education, pressures of social expectations and mutual expectations, which will result into some kind of pain among the family members. And of course, we have a silent bombarding in terms of the technological addiction, device addiction, which is happening, which is likely to cause some kind of strain if they remain average, if they don't have a parallel program on which they are to take care of the things before it becomes too complex. It is like there is a patient who is in early stage, and there is a patient who is in a chronic and the advanced stage. Who will benefit more from the treatment? Definitely it is the person who is in the early stage. So average families, unless they are on a self-development path, and of course there are very few great families, and great families are the ones who are writing their own stories, and they are the ones who will set up an example for many others to follow. And I guess at least 50% of the families are dysfunctional, either in the obvious or silent way. Around 35 to 40% of the families are average, and there may be around 10% of families who are on the path to become great families. Now, do we keep silent about it? That is something which we can consider further. And to understand if we should act, or whether we should act, or whether it is possible to control this phenomena, we need to really understand how has the family system gotten dismantled. Maybe we can do a separate long session on this particular point. We can brainstorm on it. There can become number of reasons. We can take it up separately. But perhaps this defines very precisely the why of our work, the Advait framework that we are creating. Our driving force is to re-establish that missing soft infrastructure which was available 2 decades ago to the every new child by default, every new generation by default. Does our new generation not deserve it? They also deserve the same insight and the emotional security, as well as the environment where they could develop as street smarts and the real smarts that we had in our time before 80s. And why not? And if it was impossible, then it was different thing altogether. But is it possible? And yes, I think we can build upon the discussions, and there is a framework Advait is building up, and with which it can be addressed systematically, provided it happens with the commitment or with the resource requirement for any infrastructure. Infrastructure development requires ample work. When there is a metro work happening, maybe almost for 4, 5, 6, 10 years, the localites have to suffer in some way. So before we conclude today's session, maybe you can give a quick feedback by going to this Google form. The link is here at the bottom with the blue fonts. Do you also feel that these observations are right? Do you also feel that it is happening across the cultures, regardless of small cities or large cities, regardless of India or Australia or US? And finally, do you think it is worth working for this cause at all? Now, as you take a few moments to respond to this simple Google form, I will, at the end of the submission, you will be able to see the results also. Now, this particular illustration I have been able to draw from one of the YouTube talks. I'll post the link. I'll give the link at the end of this this conversation. It talks that how does any infrastructure come up? Infrastructure comes up when there is a public capital invested, there is private capital invested, and there is a social capital invested. Let me explain briefly. Where, for example, suppose there is an airport coming up, and around the airport there is a network of highways which connect various parts of city or nearby cities to the airport. So when this has to happen, there has to be a public capital put into the project, which could be in form of policy, which could be in form of some initial funding, which could be in form of facilitation, lawmaking, and monitoring the whole process. There are private players who need to come into picture. The companies who will build the highways, the companies who will build the runways and the landing terminals and the security systems and the airport infrastructure itself, which of course requires huge capital outlays. So big companies come into picture here. Then there is a social capital also which must come into the playground, and that is in form of the villagers giving away their piece of land where they used to do the farming and part with their livelihood and the emotional attachment they had with the land, and get relocated to a new place. So social capital needs to come maybe in this way. Social capital also needs to come in form of the taxes which people pay and which needs to be channelized to the project development. So this parallel is right now for us to give a thought, because the same three kinds of capital will be required to develop the soft infrastructure also. Today we may have started with our own initiative, using our own saved money. But as we gain momentum, as we are able to show results, as we are able to have more documentation, which is already happening for last 10 years in a very systematic manner. In fact, there are more than 8 research papers and entire PhD which has been produced. So there are initiatives which we have taken, and there are results which we will be able to document and show. And slowly we can reach to a position where we can draw more and more people to join hands with us. So people who are like-minded, who share the vision, who are philanthropic in their approach, who like to contribute in development of such soft infrastructure all over again. And once we are able to gain momentum through these two, we can even approach to the policymakers, because at the moment the government is focusing only on the formal education system when it comes to developing the society and people and nation. And perhaps the think tank in the government and bureaucratic circles need a new vision, a new angle to be incorporated into the national policies and strategies. We should be able to influence the public segment, the public sector segment also in due course of time. But at the moment, this is the thought process which can help us to stay on course, that yes, there are three kinds of capital requirement if we want to develop the soft infrastructure all over again. At this juncture, if you have any quick question, you can put in the chat box, or I can. And since we are more or less connecting with each other at a personal level at this stage, and those of you who have known me personally for some time, I must accept that Advait is not Arvind, or Arvind, the one who has been or had been making many mistakes, right? Advait is a system which, though I have been actively involved in developing, but it is a system. That is what we need to take a note of, right? I think I draw from one of the Robert Kiyoski's insights, where he says that one of the secrets of success in business is to create a system and make it big, so big that we start serving that system. We would meet next week once again, and these are weekly webinars, and I am sure this series will continue for quite a long time. And you can find the points we are going to discuss in the next week on the Advait website on the webinar page. And till then, you can please spare a few minutes to email me your feedback on what we discussed today. And I will recommend this particular video, which is available on YouTube, from where I have drawn the idea of this three kinds of capital that are required for developing the infrastructure. It has been covered in this video called The Third Industrial Revolution. It's an amazing talk, though it is a little long, maybe around an hour and 20 minutes or so. Maybe in 2 or 3 pieces, or maybe 10 minutes per day kind of speed, you can watch it. And it is definitely a must watch for the youngsters and millennials, because it is covering the kind of scenario the youngsters will experience through their career and their life. Next 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. What is it going to be like? And what should be their thought process or preparation to be able to make their way through in those situations when the third industrial revolution would be taking turns. We, the previous generation who have lived the second industrial revolution, we may or may not be able to help them in a big way. We may or may not be useful to them to deal with the situations they are going to face. But with right kind of inputs and insights in advance, they can definitely do their planning. So I recommend all the youngsters, especially those who are born after 1990s, to watch this video. And with this, I like to close this session for now. And if you have any questions, you can get back to me through the comment box if you're watching it on YouTube channel. Thank you.